So we're here in our permanent plot number 5 out on Trail B at Woodlands Trail in 2022. Why don't you guys tell me about what's going on with these plots out here this year?
So they're, I thought he was going to start that.
Okay, Tom.
Well, it's just
why don't you tell us?
that Hurricane Ida hit in early September, late August, and it seems to have hit the damage is not evenly spread out. There are parts of the forest that are intensely affected by the winds. And for instance, if you look over to here, you can see a pile of wood as if someone had stacked up all this dead wood. But all that blew, as if a bunch of trees blew there and then left the rest of the forest more or less intact. So there are discrete areas of intense damage.
And the other thing which is happening is that this forest is getting a whole series of chronic disturbances. So it's not like there was one big event that happened and now the forest has been slowly recovering. There's been a multiple events that have come in and are continuing to down trees, create gaps, create disturbances. And on top of that, we've been doing control activities. So I'm pretty sure this was one of the plots that had a brush hog that went through a lot of it several years ago as part of the control effort. And so there's sort of a continuing, ongoing set of disturbances that are affecting these plots.
So overall, how would you characterize the recovery of this bottomland hardwood forest? This section of bottomland hardwood forest. This section was harder hit than the other regions, than the areas farther back in the property. But how would you characterize what's happened since Katrina here?
Well, the forest was recovering from Katrina slowly, and now, but there were still areas, acute areas of damage, and now it seems like it's just one damaging event on top of another damaging event. So we're getting kind of a matrix of disturbance that's kind of unpredictable where it's happening. John?
Yeah, the other kind of disquieting thing is that we're continuing to lose large trees.
Yeah, the canopies.
The canopy's getting thinner and thinner, and we don't have what seems to be a whole lot of medium-aged trees. Medium-aged red maples, medium-aged mulberries.
By that you mean like a decade old or 15 years old?
So this is about it's decade or so after things have settled down after Katrina. We don't see a whole big cohort of
recruitment.
10-year-old red maples, 10-year-old mulberries, 10-year-old box elders.
With at least some species, we see a good number of recruits, but they don't seem to make that from germination to sort of larger establishment. They don't seem to be making that demographic transition.
Right.
Okay, well there we are, 2022. Anything else you guys like to add in conclusion for this year's sort of big picture assessment?
Well, I'm thinking, they plant seedlings and saplings along the trails, and I think survivorship is probably less than 5%. I think they should try to grow these the trees that they transplant into the forest to a larger size, and by applying some fertilizer and caring for them carefully, I think you could get very big trees in a relatively short period. I'm talking about maybe 6 years. Larger trees that could contribute seed to the plots.
So you're thinking it's a physiological limitation. You're trying to get them to grow faster.
Yeah.
And that it maybe is not the disturbance or grazing or something like that.
Yeah, I think, there's lots of things that might be slowing them down here.
John Boy, what do you say?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's the physiological establishment more so than we have lots of herbivory going on. I mean, we see lots of examples. Just looking around, we see lots of the sapling is still there, but it's died. Right? And so there could be lots of things for that sort of timing, how they're being planted. A lot of these are being planted by volunteers who are inexperienced.
Right.
Maybe the timing of when they're getting planted is
Right.
not optimal. And just the randomness of things, like it happens to maybe the season's the right season, but it didn't rain for 2 weeks that time you planted them up. So on top of, I think all those sorts of things lead to low establishment, which is not actually, that's sort of often the norm in cases like this. You get relatively low establishment, and you do see a few examples of, I've seen several cypress that were obviously planted and are now at like 5 or 6 year stage, and they've established and they're growing, but there's not a lot of them, and they're not at the same magnitude at the level of the ongoing disturbances and the loss of the large trees.
Yeah, and then I would also wonder, I think those things are all right. I think I would also wonder about the greater environmental setting as well. So things seem to be more frequently maybe getting misaligned phenologically, potentially, or at least there's the possibility for that. So this year we had, in our week here, we had, the temperature changed over 50 degrees, and I don't ever remember that in the past. I'm sure it must have happened in the past, but that, in all the years we've come in here, we've never seen that big a swing, and so I wonder how much that stuff is also influencing it. So the drying, wetting, hotter, colder, those kinds of things can also be problematic. So there we go. Okay, 2022.